Moneysense is brought to you with the support of OneTradeX. OneTradeX, the Cayman Islands' #1 choice for online brokerage.
Live from Radio Cayman Studio, this is
Moneysense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
A very good morning and welcome everyone to Moneysense. Your hosts this morning are Christophe Barnett and myself, Simon Caudry. Today's show is dedicated to discussing pensions. The government has a new law out for consultation, and we're going to discuss its implications and the broader pension topic in general with our guest this morning. Pensions are something that are often ignored as either being not relevant, boring, or too far away in the future to worry about. In the rest of the world, governments persuade people to save for their pension by in effect bribing them through tax deductions. Cayman doesn't have that option and instead compels by law people to save. This morning, I'm delighted to be joined here in the studio by Minister Tara Rivers, by Mr. Mario Ebanks, the Acting Superintendent of Pensions, and by the former Superintendent of Pensions, Ms. Amy Wollaston. Thank you everyone for joining and good morning. Well, let me start off, if I may, by asking perhaps the most basic and fundamental of questions to the group. In Cayman, if someone doesn't save for their pension retirement, what happens to them when they retire?
Well, I think that's a fundamental question and a fundamental reason why pensions in a jurisdiction such as the Cayman Islands is an important one. As you said, bribery is never a good thing. And so the Cayman Islands has taken the view that we need to have some sort of mandatory regime that requires people to put away for their own savings. And that's why the pensions system that we have in place now is not a tax per se. It is actually a forced savings for your retirement. And in the end, if people don't have such savings, then they either, in many cases, unfortunately, may become destitute or wards of the state. And in a system where we don't have this kind of social safety net that other countries have, that have the kind of income tax and social security type system, it can then become a real challenge for the country to be able to support people in this situation without having the necessary infrastructure in place to do so. The country is very generous with what we do in trying to support our elderly people that may find themselves in this situation. But we certainly want to encourage people, especially young people who have the ability to accumulate savings for their retirement, to think long term, and we help them along by having a mandatory pension regime in that regard.
Because I think as a young person, I'm no longer young, but when I was younger, I didn't think about pensions because it was so far in the future. And I thought to myself, well, that's someone else's problem, or I'm never going to get to that stage. But in Cayman, if 20% or 30% of the population didn't save, didn't plan for themselves, the government wouldn't have the finances to be able to support them in any case at that stage, would it, I suppose?
Well, like I said, there certainly would be a lot of challenges that the government would have to try to navigate at that point. And this is one way to try to mitigate those particular concerns by actually having people save while they are earning an income towards their retirement. Because, as a people, we're very proud, we're very independent, we're very self-sufficient from our cultural heritage. And that's something we want to continue to promote amongst our people at all levels and all stages of their lives. And so as retired persons, we want them to be able to live as comfortably and as independently as possible within the means that they have accumulated while they were working.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. And let's just perhaps take a step back if we can and just contextualize Cayman's pension system. We've had a pension system in Cayman for, about 18, 19 years, thereabouts?
Since 1998.
So 17 years, there we go, quick bit of maths there. So we've had a pension system for about 17 years. Fundamentally, why change it today or why change it now? What are the key elements what are the key reasons for changing it? Who was advising the government, and what was the general perception as to why this needed to be changed now?
Well, since the inception of pensions here in the Cayman Islands, we've had time to test the legislation, so to speak, to see where the issues are and what were the concerns. So in addition to actual kind of accumulated recommendations by the Department of Environment and Employment Relations, which is now kind of evolved into the Department of Labour and Pensions, with respect to the regulation aspect of the regime, the there has been a number of concerns that have been expressed over the years with respect to the actual operation of the regime, the enforcement of the legislation and the like. And so the government of the day in 2007 had a report done or a study done by Mercer Human Resource Consulting through a competitive bid process. They were awarded the contract to conduct a review of the pensions legislation, looking at it from the administrative and actuarial as well as an investment analysis to give the country an understanding as to where we are with pensions. Is it meeting the intended objectives, and what needs to change in order to strengthen the regime? So that report, which basically sat on the shelf for quite some time, acted as a big source of information for the current government. Now that when we took office in early 2013, and myself in particular, went back to the team and said, right, where are we with respect to pensions? What do we know? What are the issues? And that was one of the reports that I was pointed to. In addition to that, since then, in 2010, the Office of the Complaints Commissioner had done its own motion investigation, which was entitled Penny Pinching Pensions, which really looked at the ability of the National Pensions Office to effectively investigate, charge and convict private sector companies who are non-compliant with pension contributions as mandated under the law. So looked at the compliance issues that the regime was facing and made a number of recommendations as well. So those two reports really kind of formed the basis in many instances for the recommended changes in the bill, as well as the actual practical experiences and recommendations of the Department of Labour and Pensions.
And let's just focus quickly on one thing you were saying there. You said that this report, or one of the fundamental bases for it, was a report prepared by Mercer. For those who aren't familiar with Mercer, Christophe, I mean, is it perhaps just useful giving some context to who Mercer are, what their calibre of quality is, so that people don't think it's, give us some illustration of who they are, so that people understand that this is a globally well-known organisation.
Well, Mercer is a global consultancy firm, and they have experts in many fields. And so when they get a contract like was presented by the government, they can leverage their resources, experience with pensions around the world, and share that knowledge and make it specific to Cayman. For example, they'll have the actuarial professionals and databases to look at, okay, how does life expectancy work in the pension? How do contributions affect total savings and total ability to meet the needs in retirement? And then to look at where a specific pension plan, i.e. Cayman, would be sort of deficient in meeting those ideal goals of a pension system.
Okay, so we the starting point that we're using here is a globally recognised, credible institution. So that's clearly a good point. We're not creating something which has no context in terms of a global perspective, which is has been done in many other countries, and without that context. So that's obviously a good thing. What are the key things then that the government wants this new law to deliver? If you were to sort of put your top three objectives and what you're trying to achieve here, tell me what those are, and perhaps in that, what does it do, or does it do anything for those people who are retiring? And how does it explain to those people what their circumstances are going to be?
Well, really, in a nutshell, I guess you would say the key objectives are to basically, in many instances, recognize the same longevity of people. We're living longer, and also recognizing that the system that we have in place now, the kind of thresholds, aren't sufficient to meet the goal of ensuring that people have the best possible chance to live as independently as possible. So the increase in the age of pension entitlement to 65, as well as increasing the cap, the annual cap, from current 60,000 to what is recommended to be 87,000, which is an inflation-adjusted figure of what was presented in the 2007 report. So in 2007 report, they recommended 72,000. We got the Economics and Statistics Office to give us a real day 2015 figure, and that's what they came back with. So those two things really help to move us towards making sure that there's more for savings, in terms of people being able to draw on more savings, draw on more pension funds by the time they get to retirement. So increasing that ability for people to live independently is a key objective. Another key objective of this bill is to ensure that pension plan members have access to information. So increased transparency in the whole process as to how administrators administer the funds, who are their investment advisors, what are the activities of the funds. So increased information, increased information sharing and reporting obligations is also a key tenet of this particular bill. A third main objective would be to increase compliance and to beef up the kind of enforcement mechanisms, which in both reports it was kind of determined to be lacking in that regard. So making sure that now that we have an enhanced or would have an enhanced legislative regime, a big part of that is making sure that there is compliance with that regime as well. And so the areas where it was determined to be deficient, low fines or in some instances no fines, and other types of enforcement mechanisms, which this particular bill does include, those I would say would be the kind of top three objectives that the government is trying to achieve with making this bill, putting this bill forward.
Okay, perhaps if I may, before we take a break, I just want to focus in or hone in on the enforcement part of the conversation there. What additional resources? It's all very well creating a bill which creates the legislation, which people can be fined and such like, but are there going to be additional resources made available to what the new position is going to be created, Director of Pensions and such like? People will have to, in order to give people confidence that that's actually going to have teeth, you need to have the next step as well. So how's that going to work, and what are the implications there?
Well, since taking office, Simon, the government has kind of recognized the deficiency in the resources in the department, and we've actually beefed up the department quite a bit. We've actually increased the actual number of bodies in the department to 9 additional persons. So that's across both pensions and labour. And I think, pensions is probably, and the director can correct me now, I think pensions may have received the larger portion of that split. However, we do have another person in train for this year as well, so hopefully that will bring the department to 10 additional persons since May of 2013. So of course, there is the additional bodies per se, but there's also the restructuring of the department, which has happened as well, which was a very important move to make, because it's about, now that you have additional resources, are you best utilizing those resources as well? So that has taken place, and I think the department is really getting to a point where they can streamline and be able to maximize the efficiencies, so to speak, within the department as well. And another aspect of the kind of enforcement mechanism that will hopefully assist with the actual ultimate, compliance and enforcement of the law is that the bill introduces an ability to have an administrative fine regime, which is a much more efficient type of a process than having to go to the courts to mandate or mediate every single determination as it relates to any sort of pension infractions. So having this kind of more efficient, more streamlined regime, which will be built into the regime, the pensions legislation by regulations, similar to what is in place now for immigration and what is anticipated for the trade and business licensing regime. The pensions as well as the labour relations will have an ability to have a more efficient system in that regard. And also it gives the director and the department more powers to require information early, as well as the pension plan administrators themselves, putting the onus on them to be more proactive in making sure that they deal with delinquencies at the get-go. So, in addition to the additional resources, there's ways within the bill that has been addressed to strengthen dealing with delinquencies early, so it doesn't become a crisis of magnanimous proportions. And so, these are the kinds of ways which the government is trying to anticipate to be able to increase enforcement in the long run. And I don't know if the director or Amy would like to add some additional things.
Just add quickly to what the minister said. This is a good bill, the pension amendment bill, but the bill on its own is not going to do the trick, and we're not relying on that, because in the last several years the department and the National Pension Office have been working on increasing the amount of prosecutions that we do. But not only that, people may see these court cases going to court, but they don't see all of the discussion that's taking place behind the scenes between the pension officers and employers in working out payment plans and working on resolving disputes. We've had a name and shame, so-called name and shame initiative where we put all the names of the people in court on our website, and that, of course, is a deterrent as well. We worked on developing a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Public Prosecutions to help to streamline the prosecution process. The Minister mentioned the administrative fines process, which is coming. We've also done more in terms of proactive inspections of businesses and letters of good standing to do due diligence on these businesses for compliance, and also improve the investigation protocol. So a lot is being done now, and more is going to be done. But this bill will give the department the framework to do more and to bring justice quicker, more effectively, for the benefit of employers and employees.
And I think that's a crucial thing, isn't it? Because even if people aren't persuaded of the benefit of a pension, they still get immensely frustrated if their employer isn't actually contributing to their pension. You can disagree with the idea of being mandated to have a pension if you wish. That's entirely one's perspective. But the fact that someone doesn't then pay it is just reprehensible in so many ways. And everyone needs to be treated equally, and everyone needs to be allowed to have their employer contributing for them. And having the ability to for the National Pensions Office to make those investigations and get those things done is vital. We're going to take a quick break now, but when we come back, what I want to talk about is just the you and I, Mario, had talked once before about the quality of the people you've got in your department, and I was surprised by some of the people that you've brought in over the recent years, and I think it would be interesting just to learn about the types of people. Just so people can have some confidence that there actually are the skill sets there who can do the investigations, who understand the regime and such like. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll discuss that.
One TradeX knows there's more than one way to invest. One TradeX is the Cayman Islands' only fully licensed online broker-dealer, offering discount trading services to individual investors and traders, hedge fund managers, and family offices. One TradeX has the most competitive online trading prices of any offshore broker worldwide, with no custody or management fees, free demonstration accounts, and no charge to open an account with a $5,000 minimum deposit. Trade stocks, options, futures, bonds, and Forex. Learn more and open your free demo account today at onetradex.com. One TradeX, the Cayman Islands' #1 choice for online brokerage.
This is
Moneysense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community. Brought to you by the CFA Society Cayman Islands and sponsored by One TradeX.
And now, more Money Sense.
Welcome back, and I'm continuing to be delighted to be joined by our guest this morning. Mario, before the break, we talked about, I was asking you the resources that the department have, the skill set they have. I think it would be useful to a lot of the audience just to understand the actual resources that do exist in the National Pensions Office, because that gives people confidence, I think, once they understand this, that actually with the right framework in place, if their employer is not making the right or behaving in the right way, they can be found out and they can actually be prosecuted or administratively fined, as the case may be. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes, we have a good team at the National Pensions Office. We have a solid team of 5 senior pensions officers. 2 of those are former RCIPS senior officers, and they're retired from the RCIPS, from the police service, and they're very, very good and very strong on prosecutions, taking matters to court, of course, investigations. And that's Mr. Charles Best and Mr. Martin Bodden. And we also have a lady who is a forensic scientist, and so she's more in the medical forensics, but the same basic kind of protocols in terms of analyzing the money trail and looking at stuff like that. And she's very good in terms of detail. We also have a banker, somebody who spent 25 years in banking. And so in terms of finance and in terms of doing payment plans and in terms of analyzing and doing the various accounting functions. And we also have a lady who wears many hats. She has an MBA, and she's into relationship building and negotiation and employee relations in terms of pensions, and doing a fantastic job. And then we also have a seasoned lawyer on our team. He's temporary, But so we have a good team, and the fact that we have those kind of people shows that there is the resources available. Of course, there's a lot of work as well. But what I want to thank the CFA Society for is recently we have built a good relationship with you, and I really appreciate that. And I thank you, especially Simon and Christoph and the President Monique Frederick, for sponsoring the scholarships, for the Claritas scholarships that 3 of our national pensions officers have taken or are going to be taking. And we're also working closely with you, as you know, in developing this thing we're calling the Standardized Investment Performance Reporting Protocol, something that will help us to get the different pension plans to put out their performance metrics so that it can be understood by the public, but also on the same basis. So thank you very much for that, CFA.
Absolute pleasure. Now, and thank you for the answer. I think it's part of my perception on this is that part of the challenge has been the framework and the ability to prosecute has been the constraining factor, not the skills and the resources necessary to do it. And I think that's to understand that and to have that explained gives people that comfort that with the right framework, perhaps there's a greater propensity and a greater chance of those things happening. So,
one of the critical ways in which the government is seeking to deal with compliance is the interministerial, interdepartmental cooperation that's being advanced through various pieces of legislation. The minister mentioned recently that the Builders Bill was passed that's going to require applicants to prove their pension compliance. The Trade and Business Licensing Law, which is supposed to come into effect over the summer or towards the end of the summer, also has a similar provision. So the intention there is to ensure that parties that are not being compliant aren't able to continue to operate in this environment. We need to make sure that we establish a level playing field for all employers and people are competing equitably. And by doing so, that doesn't necessitate the department taking someone to court or necessarily pursuing an administrative fine. Not that that would not be pursued, but it ensures, therefore, that people can't operate in a non-compliant environment.
Sure, absolutely. And that, as you say, I think the best expression of that is level the playing field for everyone, so that everyone is treated reasonably. Now, we obviously, despite talking about something which I discussed at the beginning as being dry and not necessarily very interesting to people, we still have a number of questions that are outstanding, particularly on the law and such like. And we've only got 3 or 4 minutes left to go through them. So Christoph and I just got a few questions, but let me start off with the first one. One of the big bugbears of a lot of people who are invested in pensions is performance of the pensions, and that is not necessarily the fault of the people managing it. It's a constraint driven by the investment regulations that are associated with the pensions. Now, and that's not to say that there are good or bad people who are managing the money. I'm simply saying that there are constraints that are imposed. What's the framework for those to be changed? What's that?
Well, as you mentioned, it is the kind of investment regulatory arm of the pensions regime is contained in the national pension fund investment regulations, which is a separate piece of legislation, so to speak, which we are actually looking to revise as we speak. So it wouldn't be reflected in this current bill of the amendment bill to the law, but we are certainly cognizant of the fact that we need to look at the whole kind of investment aspect of the regime, and so the amendments are being worked on, as I said, as we speak. When we need to ensure that there is, we strike the right balance, obviously, which includes opportunities for better investment options for the administrator, as well as obviously the necessary framework for regulatory oversight and reporting. So that's the kind of guiding principles that we're looking at when we talk about making these amendments to the investment regulations.
And what's the time frame for that, realistically?
Realistically, we're hoping, as I said, we're working on it as we speak. We want to get that out shortly thereafter once we've had a chance to finalize this bill. So I'm hoping that if not by the end of this year, early next year, we'll have something in place to be able to move forward with.
Fair enough. And now, two questions, specific number questions. The cap that you mentioned, the maximum pension contributions, I know you said that it was in the Mercer report at a number in a few years ago and it is inflation adjusted. Why have any cap at all? And why was the age limit raised to 65 when in a lot of the industrialized world, people now are talking, which have had 65 for decades, are now talking about 67, 68 is actually because of longevity, because of people behaving healthier, eating healthier. Why those two particular numbers?
Well, again, I mean, I think those are great questions. I mean, the only thing I can say at this point is sometimes you have to crawl before you walk, and you have to walk before you run. But I think it's because we obviously needed to have a starting point for discussion, and that certainly seemed to be a logical one, given that this had been a recommendation of the report itself. We have had a number of representations on this point, so we certainly will be considering all of the views that have been expressed when we go to actually look at refining or making any amendments to these two sections. Of course, moving from 60 to 65. 65 is, in many jurisdictions, still the age that people are aspiring to. So not every jurisdiction is already at 65, moving beyond. So again, it's about trying to find that balance of what would be reasonable, what would be able to be kind of absorbed in the market, because all these things obviously have financial implications in some degree to the pensioner as well as the employer. So we wanted to make sure we tried to take a balanced position. We know we needed to get some changes. What we have now is not sufficient. But of course, as I said, this is where the reason for public consultation. So we are looking forward to feedback on both of these points, as well as any other provisions in the bill. And we certainly will be looking at these very critically when we actually go to finalize the bill.
Just two quick points on are the payments upon retirement. I think right now the standard is $1,000 a month. Is that also in the regulations? And also, can you speak briefly just about the law sort of carves out part-time workers, 15 hours or less? What happens for people that only work part-time throughout their career or have maybe multiple part-time jobs?
Well, before we go to the first question, I'll deal with the last question. And really, and again, this is one of these provisions that's being put forward for consultation and for discussion. When we thought about introducing this particular carve out, so to speak, we also looked to see what other jurisdictions were doing that have a similar regime to ours, and we came across the Bermuda legislation, which has a similar type of threshold. They do it in actual total number of hours per annum worked. So anything over 720 hours then would be considered pensionable. Anybody working less than that would not be considered pensionable. So we said, well, okay, the impetus was to really think about, well, is this going to improve the employment prospects? Because, of course, when we started looking at this back in 2013, the issue of unemployment was still very, very much a concern. Unemployment was probably one at the highest, if not, very close to the highest we've ever had. We have since come down from that, which is a good thing. That means people are becoming employed, and unemployment is dropping. And, obviously the government is very happy to be a part of that process. So we're looking to see whether or not that is a section that we will continue to keep moving forward, but we thought it was important to put it out there for discussion, because it's not like it's a unique situation. We have discovered that other jurisdictions have similar situation, but these same concerns that you have raised have been raised in other quarters in throughout our public consultation process as well. So it is something that we will continue to look at very closely to see if we need to further refine the suggestion, or whether or not that's something that we continue to put forward in the final bill. And I'll hand it over to the director.
Mario, I'm afraid we've only got about 45 seconds.
Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you, Christophe. Your question is in relation to the $12,000 a year or $1,000 a month that folks get. That is the existing schedule under the law. It's being reviewed. We're going to tender to get some consultants to help us with it, and we're hoping to get the procurement issues sorted out very soon on that. I want to remind everybody about the meeting tonight, 7:30 p.m. at the Georgetown Town Hall, our final meeting for the public consultation series.
Well, may I thank all of the guests, Minister Rivers, Acting Superintendent Evanks, and former Superintendent Ms. Wollaston. Thank you very much all for joining us. This radio show does actually have an email address. If you do have questions about pensions, we are going to be back on air in 2 weeks' time, which is a couple of days before the actual deadline for submission. So if people have questions and they want us to address them as a roundtable amongst some of the investment professionals on Ireland, moneysense@candw.ky, drop us an email. That's moneysense@candw.ky, and we will do our very best to discuss those. And as a investment society, we will absolutely consider using those questions and inputting it in our response that we give as professionals to the government in terms of the feedback on the law. So if you have a question and you want to know, is this a sensible question, is my point reasonable, sensible, drop us an email and we'll definitely give you some guidance on that. But thank you to all the guests for your time this morning, and I wish you all a very good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye then.
Moneysense is brought to you with the support of One Trade X. One Trade X, the Cayman Islands' #1 choice for online brokerage. OneTradeX knows there's more than one way to invest. OneTradeX is the Cayman Islands' only fully licensed online broker-dealer, offering discount trading services to individual investors and traders, hedge fund managers, and family offices. OneTradeX has the most competitive online trading prices of any offshore broker worldwide, with no custody or management fees, free demonstration accounts, and no charge to open an account with a $5,000 minimum deposit. Trade stocks, options, futures, bonds, and Forex. Learn more and open your free demo account today at OneTradeX.com. OneTradeX, the Cayman Islands' #1 choice for online brokerage.